Hi, my name's Dr. Craig Norris. My research focuses on media's role in shaping our perception of the world around us. Now, when I was coordinating a university student field trip to Japan a few years ago, I became really fascinated by the Studio Ghibli theme park. So, here I'd like to explore how Studio Ghibli's anime have shaped our perception of real life locations. Now, a bit of background. For more than 3 decades, Miyazaki Hayao has built an extensive and elaborate world through his animated feature films, and also the broader media work done within commercially and critically acclaimed animation studio he co-founded in 1985, Studio Ghibli. Studio Ghibli has produced the highest grossing films in Japan, including 1989's Kiki's Delivery Service, Only Yesterday in 1991, Porco Rosso in 1992, Pom Poko in 1984, Spirited Away in 2001, as well as a long list of other big commercial successes to date. Internationally, the studio has garnered significant awards and recognition, including the American Academy Award for Best Animated Film Feature in 2003 for Spirited Away. Miyazaki has also been widely regarded as one of the most significant animation directors from Japan. In 2014, he became the second Japanese film director after Akira Kurosawa to be awarded an honorary Academy Award in recognition of his contribution to motion pictures. Thematically, Studio Ghibli films, and in particular those of Miyazaki, have been highly praised for dealing with significant issues of environmentalism and the destructiveness of war. For example, in Nausicaa, The Valley of the Wind, from 1984, covers many of these concepts. These films have also received acclaim for sensitively conveying the complex emotions of nostalgia and coming of age in films such as Spirited Away, often focusing on strong female protagonists and appealing to a broad audience of children and adults. In addition to these anime feature films, Studio Ghibli's universe of characters and worlds is mapped out over a media mix of media content, including short films, music videos, video games, books, and other material. Within this extensive fictional universe, there's a network of real locations around which the world has served as an inspiration for settings and details in these films. Some locations have become popular tourist attractions, while others have failed to generate any interest at all. For the purpose of my research and the talk I'd like to do today, these sites can be divided into two categories. Firstly, the official sites, and secondly, the unofficial sites, both of which are linked to Miyazaki films. The first type of site involves films focused on locations that Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli have incorporated into their films, and this can be found through promotional material, behind-the-scenes documentaries of their films. For example, there was one DVD documentary called Ghibli's Scenery, Japan depicted in Miyazaki Hayao's work. And these type of works basically take you through the type of locations they were looking for. And that DVD, for example, offers a travelogue of the real-life locations used throughout Europe and Japan for many of Ghibli's films in particular, including Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, My Neighbor Totoro, Spirited Away, Kiki's Delivery Service, and Howl's Moving Castle. Other examples include the Japanese island of Yakushima that inspired the forest imagery in Princess Mononoke from 1997. Interestingly, that location features a sign proclaiming that it is Mononoke Hime no Mori, Princess Mononoke's forest. Within this category of officially sanctioned sites is the Studio Ghibli Museum itself in Mitaka, which was opened in 2001. The museum offers both information about the production process of animation as well as immersion into the sights and sounds of the Ghibli world in a theme park type setting. As the Ghibli Museum English language website itself proclaims, "Open the door and welcome to Wonderland." According to Rainer Dennison's 2010 analysis of the Ghibli Museum, this hybrid museum theme park tourism should be regarded as popular culture tourism, as the museum combines an interest in popular culture with appreciation and instruction into the craft of animation. Dennison argues this anime tourism in Japan brings together high culture legitimizations of art, anime as art, with entertaining and commercially motivated museum experiences. The second category includes locations that are not officially endorsed by Miyazaki or Studio Ghibli. This is where our case study of tourism to Australia resides. A steady stream of rumors and discoveries circulate via word of mouth and online to sustain travel to these types of unofficial destinations. In the case of Australia, it includes buildings, locations, and native flora and fauna that have been appropriated by visiting tourists into the world of Ghibli's animation. And this is mainly done by fans on blogs or social network sites. These have become portals to imagine and see the Ghibli world through. The resilience of some of these portals is made more remarkable by the fact that Studio Ghibli has, in fact, denied using Australia at any point in any of the anime that it was producing. As they explained in response to the steady stream of inquiries they still received regarding visiting Japanese to Australia, claiming they'd found these locations, Miyazaki staff have said, Ghibli does use some real places around the world as reference, but there are no places in Australia that Ghibli have used. So it is very funny and strange that this rumor has spread. The official Ghibli website also includes details of the key real-world locations they did in fact use for their films. For example, the locations which provided the basis for the idealized European village depicted in Kiki's Delivery Service, which is in itself a film often linked to, of all places, the Ross Bakery in Tasmania. The truth being, these were in fact set in or drawn inspiration from areas in Stockholm, in Sweden, Wisley in the UK, and Gotland in Sweden as well as the Baltic Sea. And again, Studio Ghibli have released books and behind-the-scenes documentaries detailing these locations they went to get location inspirations from, which they later on depicted in Kiki's Delivery Service. Yet it's really interesting that the experience of these fans as they discover and immerse themselves in what we could call Ghibli's Australia, in fact still continues to grow and spread via media sites and travel blogs even today. Back in 2007, Japanese actor and celebrity Hidehiko Ishizuka visited Tasmania's Ross Bakery dressed as the cat Gigi from Kiki's Delivery Service. And this was done in a television travel special called Ishi-chan's Comic Travelogue of the Animal Kingdom, journeying 1,000 kilometers to the southern paradise of Tasmania. And that's a translation from the Japanese original title, which I'll put up here now.
そう、そこに行くんだぜ。
それでこの格好か。
そうだよ。
あとは町の人が不気味がらなければいいんだけど。
可愛いひとみちゃんキキと不気味な石ちゃんジジ、そんな二人がパン屋さんを探して歩いていくと、
どこなんだいそのパン屋さんは。
パン屋さんはね、ここだよ。
ここがモデルになったパン屋さん。
そう、魔女の宅急便のモデルになったパン屋さんだよ。
にゃー。
ハ
ハロー。うわー、すごいかわいい。あ、お父さんもほらマッチョだ。
ロー。あ
あ
ー。いや
ー、ハロー。あ、
ハロー。
ハロー。
How do you do?
I thank you.
こちらが映画魔女の宅急便に登場したパン屋さんのモデルになったと言われるロス・ヴィレッジ・ベーカリー。映画公開後
There are even tour operators, in fact, offering Ghibli-themed trips to particular sites in Australia with advertising claims that reads, "Landscapes from those scenes are found in Australia to travel the world of Miyazaki's anime." So an obvious question to ask is, why has Australia, a location that was never visited or used by Miyazaki or Studio Ghibli, become a portal for many tourists who visit Australia, a portal into this fictional Ghibli world? To answer this question, we can have a look at some of the social media posts. For example, the social media posts posted by Japanese in the Mixi community. And there's a Mixi community, a social media community that's named Hayao Miyazaki's World in Australia. And it's a site dedicated to discussing and circulating links between Australia and the scenes and locations depicted in Miyazaki's films. This group was established way back in April 1st, 2006, and still has posts occurring even today. While a lot of social media has moved past Mixi, it's still a location for interesting blogs and comments to occur. So again, many of the posts to this social forum range from greeting messages discussing Australian locations that evoke elements of Miyazaki's films, but the two most common commented locations on these threads were the Ross Bakery in Tasmania, which has links, it's claimed, to Kiki's delivery service, and this features about 94 comments, as well as Queensland's Perenella Park and its claimed relationship to Laputa, Castle in the Sky. And this has about 74 comments at the moment, though that number often changes and can increase. So the number of comments posted to each topic range from a high of 544 posts on the general greeting topic to as small as just under 5 comments for less popular topics, but it's still quite a vibrant community. There's an average of about 28 comments per topic, suggesting a reasonably active and involved community for such a niche topic as locating Ghibli locations in Australia, or claimed Ghibli locations. So a bit of background on Mixi, as it might be largely unfamiliar to many Westerners. Now, Mixi was founded way back in 2004 as a social network platform for specifically the Japanese domestic market, and it quickly became a market leader there. Many commentators at the time and since have considered the key appeal of Mixi to be its early adoption of mobile phone access, integration of music and news sharing, its ease of reviewing products and posting online to the forum site, its anonymity, its open-sourced software community, and group features which could range from broad to specific topics, such as in this case that we're exploring here in this talk, where Ghibli fans have been posting their interest in specific Miyazaki-influenced tourism to Australia. So it's a bit of a cross between maybe a Facebook and Reddit community. So Mixi attained its peak popularity between 2010 and 2011, when it reached a peak of about 20 million users. From 2012, the site began a downward spiral in popularity and revenue, as well as membership numbers. And again, this was specifically because of the increasing popularity of competitors such as Facebook. Now, it also suffered around this time because of its restrictive sign-up process that effectively excluded potential users outside of Japan from accessing it or signing up to it. Sorry. However, the recent success of its Monster Strike mobile game, this was a few years back now in 2013, shows that Mixi is not quite dead and might still have a second life in another digital environment. Additionally, the early popularity of Mixi's group feature has meant that niche topics, such as the one we're looking here on Miyazaki or Ghibli tourism to Australia, have maintained a somewhat steady and consistent core user base that still continues, albeit in a very reduced faculty today. But as of yet, there is no equivalent visible Ghibli on Facebook or competing social media platforms, but I'm sure this will change. While Mixi is certainly no longer the vibrant social media network it once was, it still presents a useful archive of content produced by niche communities across a quite interesting, specifically duration of time. In terms of this idea of Ghibli's tourism to Australia, my observations of this group began with an exploration of the broader grassroots practices which contribute to this larger Studio Ghibli media tourism space, and then followed up with closer analysis of some of the key posts and topics to identify the ways these niche communities are making use of the Ghibli and Miyazaki brand and films as the raw material and cultural resource, as Fisk and Jenkins and others would point to. So a cultural resource for their ongoing discussions and creativity with each other and their journeys to these real-world locations. Participating in popular culture tourism. Of course, Miyazaki-related tourism to destinations such as Australia is part of a much broader global phenomena where various locations have become popular tourist destinations based on their link to popular movies or television shows or other pop culture. In addition to well-known international examples, such as in New Zealand with Lord of the Rings movies, there's also been a growing number of research-focused articles and books on tourism to locations linked specifically with Japanese films, television, books, manga, anime, literature, and so forth. This type of research is referred to as content tourism, coined by Seaton and Yamamura in 2015. Nobuhara Imai, for example, explored 3 of Japan's largest fan culture locations: Tokyo's Comic Market, Comiket, the Lucky Star anime fan pilgrimages to Kasukabe, and as well as their pilgrimages to Washimiya in Saitama Prefecture, and the proliferation of otaku interests in Akihabara as well. The Lucky Star tourism phenomena has been particularly spectacular, as Takuyoshi Yamamura's 2009 analysis reveals of the economic rejuvenation this type of tourism has brought into these towns in that area, particularly the towns where the anime was set in. An important work in terms of this talk's themes is Brian Bergstrom's 2014 exploration of Japanese Anne of Green Gables fans. In particular, the experience of Okuda Miki, who traveled to Canada in the early 1990s to immerse herself in the symbolic real location for Anne, which she discovered there. Bergstrom examines how the embodied experience and cross-cultural practice of Japanese Anne of Green Gables fans reveals a complex interplay between experience, identity, and the space as fans experience a real place as both an extension of one's engagement with a fictional world, as well as a portable landscape to navigate their relationship to the world around them and their changing sense of self. While this talk here will build upon this type of research by exploring the practices fans use as they visit these key locations, which have been made popular by popular media texts, the focus of what I want to talk about now differs a little bit in that it explores purely grassroots phenomena, where the fans have, to a large degree, defined the experience outside of the top-down management or influence of a media studio or any other commercial industry. Of particular relevance to this talk is the recent research around participatory cultures that explored the rise of user-generated content in online spaces. For example, Benkler in 2006 and Jenkins in 2006. Henry Jenkins in particular defines participatory culture as having the following theme: relatively low barriers to artistic expression and civic engagement, strong support for creating and sharing one's creations, and some type of information mentorship whereby what is known by the most experienced is passed along to novices, and where members believe that their contributions matter and feel some degree of social connectedness with one another. In the case of using commercial content and privileging the activities of fans and consumers as active participants, Jenkins argues that, and to quote, "The power of participation comes not from destroying commercial culture, but from writing over it, modding it, amending it, expanding it, adding greater diversity of perspective, and then recirculating it, feeding it back into the mainstream media." Like Joshua Green and Jenkins's 2011 focus on participation and the circulation of content online, the type of use of this term I want to do here does not assume that all fans will be involved in creating this type of labor-intensive content, but that even the most basic low-level efforts, like clicking like on a forum post, has implications for the spread and impact of cultural material. It is within the practices and processes of media users as tourists that we can best understand the Hayao Miyazaki world in anime Mixi community. Being a Miyazaki fan tourist. In discussing their trips to Australia, being a Miyazaki or Ghibli fan was contextualized most commonly as an engagement with nature and the environment. This isn't surprising given the well-established significance of the environment and related themes of spiritualism in Miyazaki's films. My Neighbor Totoro, for example, provides a particularly vivid example of this, where objects and places are imbued with life and power, from the dust creatures named Susiwatari to the forest creatures such as Totoro, to even the fantastical animal forms such as the Nekobasu, a cat bus. There is a clear interrelatedness of nature, objects, and humanity that some have linked to similar themes in Shinto, as well as to broader environmental concerns in Miyazaki's films. For members of this Mixi community, traveling to Australia is an important opportunity to visit spectacular locations and demonstrate an empathy with Miyazaki's themes of the wonder and awe nature inspires. For many fans, their discovery of Australia's environment converges with their knowledge of Miyazaki's depiction of nature, and this can sometimes culminate in epiphanies of realization. For example, this quote from one of the visitors: Even though I have been staying in Australia for over 6 months, I didn't know that so many Australian locations have been used for Ghibli movies. I have been to so many places in Australia, and I've found that the scenery is great. I think Miyazaki is very intuitive. I'm going to the Nausicaa Valley of the Wind location, Kata Tuda, in Australia next week. I'm so surprised that Uluru is also called Valley of the Wind. There is a clear emphasis in this post on Australia's natural beauty and how well it overlaps with the image of nature in Miyazaki's films. In this case, it is underpinned by the belief that Miyazaki himself must have travelled to Australia and been inspired by these locations. The discovery that, to quote, so many Australian locations have been used for Ghibli films, end quote, is also presented as participating in this collaborative mapping by fans of Miyazaki's locations in Australia. The tourist here has drawn upon the locations listed within this Mixi community to create an itinerary and then posting updates as they travel through these locations. This poster announces that the next location will be the famous group of large rock formations in Australia's Northern Territory, Kata Tuta and Uluru, which many fans link to the desolate yet beautiful landscape of the post-apocalyptic anime Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind. As the post reveals, there is also a popular bushwalk in the Uluru National Park known as the Valley of the Winds. And this walk is connected to this idea, specifically because of the strong winds and winding valley which the trail covers. An interesting reference. The collective nature of locating and documenting these sites on Mixi for people to share and discuss is one of the guiding principles for this Mixi community, searching for Ghibli's presumed locations in Australia. As seen in the opening sentence of the Hayao Miyazaki World in Australia guidelines, the purpose of this community is to upload photos of scenery that is similar to the scenery of Ghibli movies. The importance of collaboratively sharing information also appears in one of the earliest posts in the community from May 17th, 2006. Ghibli movies are great. Ghibli movies are one of the best parts of Japanese popular culture, and they remind us about things we tend to forget today. When I found this community, I felt really inspired. Mixi is incredible. A number of posts were devoted to the sense of community, as well as information that is gained from joining the community through an affinity based on Ghibli's fictional and real-world geographies. To quote from another commentator on this community, I used to live in Sydney about 3 years ago. However, I didn't have a chance to visit any Ghibli locations. I'm going to Australia again next year, and I'll definitely go to those places. However, does somebody know about the bakery in Tasmania that is believed to be the model of Kiki? In the following example, we see the value of the Mixi community's hunting and gathering of information through its usefulness as a type of tour guide. To quote, I live in Adelaide. I am a freelance tour guide, driver, interpreter, Japanese language teacher, and writer. I decided to join this community because I would like to know information about Ghibli places that I have been as a tour guide. If you would like to know more, check this link. The rumours around Ghibli using Australia as reference material is here presented as useful information for a tour guide to use with Japanese visitors. However, in contrast to tour guides having to answer and have information about locations, the post presents the discovery of Ghibli's film locations as an ongoing improvisation and exploration occurring in online communities. On the forum, the regularity of sharing information, posting pictures, and inquiring about the authenticity of the rumors establish a collective vision of Miyazaki tourism. It is an imaginative community, a participatory community, an inquisitive community. For example, in the following post, we see how the surprise of discovering Australia's connection to Miyazaki's films is presented within a broader global tourism of also discovering Ghibli locations in Europe and, of course, Japan. To quote, "I didn't know that there are so many places in Australia that were the models for Ghibli movies. Is this true? I lived in Germany until this year, and I found many places that were identical to the scenery used in Ghibli films. I particularly felt that Laputa fitted these places well. Actually, I know some Ghibli locations in Japan too." And this quote's followed up by another. "My most favorite Miyazaki movie is Kiki's Delivery Service, so my dream is to visit the places that were used as models for this movie. I am so surprised that the model was in Australia, because I used to think the model should be somewhere in Europe. However, I have heard that many places around the world are used as models. Could somebody who knows about this reply?" The uncertainties around the film's links to Australia are presented here as needing further exploration and discovery, and fact-checking. In contrast to enforcing a privileged, authentic location, there seems to be possibly, if you wanted to be generous, a freedom to explore any possibility of discovering Ghibli in the real world. By allowing this uncertainty to exist around various locations, this poster establishes an open-minded position in respect to the Australian locations, one that is broadened by their own experience of travel and discovery of Ghibli locations in other countries. The emphasis here, I think, is on discovery, exploration through travel, and taking leaps of faith. And these leaps of faith are one to follow one's curiosity down the metaphorical rabbit hole of Ghibli's real-world locations. And in some ways it mimics the motivation of many of Miyazaki's main characters themselves. For example, the coming-of-age story of Kiki in Kiki's Delivery Service, and Chihiro in Spirited Away, to the nostalgia directed towards childhood wonder and awe which Miyazaki captures in the characters of these two young sisters in My Neighbor Totoro and the 5-year-old Sosuke in Ponyo. Like the creative transpositions described by Matt Hills in Hills's research on fan media pilgrimages, these type of fan moves, tourist moves to locations, involve fans often identifying with the key tropes and character traits of a television show or film, and then performing these in the real location. Examples include acting out key scenes from the film for a photograph or a selfie in a real location, to dressing up in a character's costume, or projecting a main character's narrative arc onto their own experiences at a location. Again, such as in the case of Kiki's Delivery Service coming-of-age story and Japanese visitors to Tasmania's Ross Bakery. Consider, for example, the following post about the Ross Bakery in Tasmania and the fact that many Japanese visitors feel it's the same bakery as the one depicted in Kiki's Delivery Service. The rumor of the bakery's link to Kiki has become so well known that they've even set up a small room for accommodation above the bakery called Kiki's Room, which fans can visit and stay in, as well as use some of the props that they've set up, such as the broomstick resembling the main characters. So to quote a fan who visited, I'm a big fan of Kiki's delivery service. After watching the movie, I pretended I was flying in the sky with a broom. Smile. I would like to visit the bakery one day. However, such identifications and performances do not go unchallenged. While some posters frame their experience around the belief that Miyazaki himself must have visited these locations, others present themselves as knowing that neither Miyazaki nor anyone from Studio Ghibli has used Australia as a reference source in these films. The framing of truth. In this final section, I will consider how forum members on Mixi manage and frame the authenticity of their experience. These posts are designed and significant in revealing the strategies for managing the central paradox of their experience, that none of it is real. Yet the acts of identification and performance by these fans in Australia involve a wholehearted act of imagination and suspension of disbelief that makes it real. The locations in Australia are doubly not real in terms of the films themselves being fictional, not real, and the fact that these locations, in reality, were not in fact used by Miyazaki or Ghibli when creating the setting for these films. So again, doubly fictional. The following two examples from the administrator of the Hayao Miyazaki World in Australia Mixi community show how this paradox is negotiated. On the site's FAQ section, the forum administrator posted, "Actually, in the Ghibli films, never have they used any Australian locations. However, because many Japanese visitors may think this looks like Ghibli, this community is a way to collect these rumored locations. We can just enjoy these rumors and share in the atmosphere when we visit there." Although the number of posts directly discounting the possibility that Miyazaki or Studio Ghibli have in fact visited or used Australia as an inspiration for their films was only rare, these rare posts are significant as they are from the administrator and are an attempt to manage the reality or fiction of the link between Miyazaki and Australia, and specifically the type of fan practices that still occur. That is, the suspension of disbelief, the fantasy that there is a connection. This post also defines the purpose of this Miyazaki community. These posts try to be as inclusive of the community's acts and practices as possible. In doing so, while acknowledging the lack of authenticity in these Australian locations claimed to be based for Ghibli films, members are encouraged still to continue circulating their experiences and discoveries of finding Ghibli's atmosphere within Australia. Conclusion. This talk's focused on the appropriation of Miyazaki's films into real-world locations by Japanese fans on the Mixi forum, Hayao Miyazaki's World in Australia. This forum reveals the creative and imaginative ways fans have negotiated Miyazaki's key themes, motifs, and narratives through identification and performance are grounded in such places as Ross Bakery in Tasmania. These posts have also shown how the fans playfully blur the real and fictional, the authentic and inauthentic, in often paradoxical and contradictory ways. Although there is no truth connecting Australia to Miyazaki's films, the resilience of these rumours and fan travelogues is remarkable. As Jenkins has suggested, fans and audiences are increasingly able to participate in the production and circulation of content online in a way that is more visible and public than it has ever been before. In the context of the continued spread of Australia's virtual links to Miyazaki's world, the truth that Miyazaki never visited or used Australia for his locations is bittersweet. While the persistence of these links within fan communities reveals the power of Japanese fans to repurpose popular culture for their own needs as they travel overseas, the inauthenticity of these locations is problematic, to say the least. However, if there is an authenticity, it can be understood as a highly personal and subjective one, based on a convergence of travel, life experience, and an ironic transposition of the fictional onto the real. The process of experiencing the world through Miyazaki's films and their themes of environmentalism, nostalgia, and transformation can potentially provide an entry point into a deeper emotional engagement of the world rather than a distortion of reality. Thank you for listening. I hope you found some of this material interesting. Bye.